Hi, I'm Nick Wass from Korg USA, and I'm here at Kraft Music with the latest version of the Electribe Sampler. As you can see, the Electribe Sampler is now available in red, reminiscent of the original ESX, which came out in the early 2000s. This unit ships with the version 2 firmware, which has key features like pattern chain, one-level undo, and an original value indicator. And if you're an existing user, you can download that firmware update right from the Korg website. Today, I'll be showing you how to sample external sources into the Electribe Sampler by dialing in a sound on the Volca kick and then sampling that on the Electribe and using the Electribe sound engine to really shape my sound. So my setup today is an Electribe sampler and a Volca kick connected through MIDI. I'm triggering the Volca kick using channel 1 on the Electribe sampler and then using an audio through as the sound for that channel. To do this, use the sample knob to select audio in mono. If you'd like a stereo input, you can select stereo, and that will use 2 channels. I have the Volca kick's audio output plugged into the audio input on my Electribe sampler, and I've dialed in a decent input level, so I'm not clipping and I'm not too quiet. As a side note, make sure to go into the menu and go to Global Parameters and make sure Audio In Through is turned on. So let's switch back to Audio in Mono. And you'll see that I've dropped the octave on the keyboard for channel 1. This is sending a very low pitch to the Volca kick, and I've dialed in a kick sound, which sounds like this. I can tweak that a little bit on the Volca kick while triggering it on the Electribe sampler. Or play it chromatically using the Electribe sampler's built-in keyboard. If I'd like a little bit less bend in that, I can turn that down to get a more melodic sound. So let's sample an electro-style kick with a little less melodic content. Turn down the decay to get less amplification envelope. Bring in some pulse. And adjust the tone to really bring out the click at the beginning of the kick sound. Now, I can use the bend and time controls to really bring out that electro-style house kick that I'm looking for. With the bend time very short, but a lot of bend, we get a really aggressive sound because the pitch of the MS-20 resonant filter is falling so quickly, it covers a huge range of territory. And if I overdrive that, I think I'm ready to sample that into my Electribe sampler. Press Shift and Record to enter sampling mode. You'll see that you begin in mono. You can also sample in stereo. However, stereo uses 2 of the Electribe sampler's tracks. So let's stay in mono for now. Let's move to sampling source. You can use either resampling or audio in. Because I'm already passing audio in through, let's use resampling. This is going to sample the output of the Electribe sampler. Because I'm using audio in through, the volca kick is included in the output of the Electribe sampler. The Electribe sampler is now armed to record. As soon as I trigger a note on the Electribe sampler, it'll start recording, and then I'll hit the stop button to stop recording that sample. Now I can preview that sound using the play button. However, I want to first turn down the volca kick so I don't hear any MIDI notes that are triggered by the play button. So now that we've sampled a kick sound into our Electribe sampler, let's bring the level up. First, let's write the sample to the Electribe sampler's internal memory by hitting the write button. Remember, if you want to save your samples for the next time you turn your Electribe sampler on, you'll have to export them to an SD card using the SD card slot on the left side of the Electribe sampler. So remember how our kick sample was a little bit quiet? First, let's select that kick sample on one of our tracks, and then I'll show you how to bring the volume level up. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the beginning of my sample list because my kick sample is going to appear at number 501, sample 1. That's pretty quiet. So let's boost the volume on that by going into the sample edit menu and finding play level and go plus 12 dB. That's starting to sound pretty good. So let's write that setting and then exit the sample edit menu. So now that I've boosted the volume of that sample, I can further boost it by using the amp level on the right side of the Electribe synth engine. Or if I really want to boost this kick, let's turn on eye effects and select an overdrive. I can even make it more punchy by using the punch eye effects. So now that we have a kick sound that we really like sampled into our Electribe sampler and dialed in so that it's punchy and full, let's start making a beat. I'm going to place track 1 into sequencer mode and use the step sequencer to make the kick drum play on the 1, 2, 3, and 4 count. That sounds like this. I can change the tempo of that by going to Menu and scrolling through the various parameters until I get to tempo. Change BPM to 128. It's a pretty standard electro house style BPM. Let's hear that. Nice. Now I can use the filter to further affect that kick. Check this out. I can use a high pass filter. Introduce some resonance. But for now, let's start building our beat with some other drum sounds from inside the Electribe sampler's internal sample banks. Let's enter trigger mode and select track 2. By default, it'll have a saw wave assigned to it. Use the sample knob to select a clap sound. I like that one. It sounds pretty good. Let's boost the level on that a little bit too. Now, let's use some delay on that to give it a room sound. Turn eye effects on for track 2, or clap, and then scroll through the types of eye effects until you find a delay. I'm going to use the 3/16 delay. Now the eye effects edit knob will bring in more or less of that delay. Now if I play my kick pattern, I can enter the step sequencer for the clap and have it play on the 2 and the 4. And that rhythmic delay is giving it a kind of housey electro sound. Now if I'd like to motion sequence that IFX so I only have delay on the second clap of the pattern, I can go into record mode and do that. First, I'm going to go into menu and turn off my metronome. Scroll to the global settings, and then find metronome and turn it off. Exit global settings, and now we can motion sequence on our beat without hearing a metronome because we already have some drum sounds recorded. So now I've got a little less delay on my first clap and a little more delay on my second clap. If I'd like to undo that motion sequence, the new Electribe OS allows me to undo that by pressing Shift and the left arrow. Now that motion sequencing is undone and I can redo it. Now let's write a simple bass line. I'm going to use track 3, which should already have a saw wave loaded on it by default. Enter trigger mode, and there it is. Let's change the waveform to a square wave or a pulse wave. And then we can edit that using the sample edit knob. Or we can introduce modulation to edit that to an LFO. Use the modulation knob to select LFO control of the sample edit knob. Now we can turn that into a fat bass line if we go into the keyboard section and drop the octave. Add some envelope settings to that by turning on the amp envelope generator. Now what I can do is introduce some filter and have the envelope control that as well. And now I can use the pitch knob to further drop the octave. Now let's go into sequence record and let's record a little bass line. I'm going to press record, and that's going to arm my Electribe to record as soon as I press a note. And since I'm in keyboard mode, I can play melodic sequences for the bass line very easily. So now that I have a bass line, let's use the Electribe sampler's wealth of internal samples to add some stuff on top of that. Use track 4, and we'll scroll through the samples until we find one that we like. Let's try that one. But let's move it up the octave. Now let's use some delay to give that a trail. Let's play our pattern, and then as the pattern's playing, we'll enter record mode and kind of jam on that and figure out where we want to drop in our sample. Now we can boost that using our level control. And if we want to apply some motion to that, we can motion sequence some filter movement on top. So our beat's really coming together. Now let's add in a hi-hat on top of that. By default, pads 13 and 14 are set to hi-hats. So let's go back into our beat and drop in a hi-hat pattern. Now we can jam on that pattern using part mute to take parts in and out. So as I mentioned before, one of the new features in the Electribe firmware update is pattern chain, which allows you to chain multiple patterns together, sort of like the song mode on the original ESX and EMX, so that you never have to use the pattern select knob to manually change a pattern. And you can program entire songs or entire sets into your Electribe, which will play through without ever having to manually change patterns. So there you have it. A short sampling tutorial utilizing the Volca kick as a sound source and the Electribe sampler to build a beat around it. I'm Nick Quas from Korg USA here at Kraft Music.